On a quiet Saturday morning in Plano, Texas, the kind of morning where families mowed their lawns and kids rode bikes along cul-de-sacs, Reginald Carter walked out of his two-story brick home. His mind was on nothing but taking the trash to the curb, a simple chore on an unseasonably warm day. He didn't even make it 10 steps before he noticed 3 figures waiting at the edge of his driveway. 2 men in black, tactical-style vests with patches that said "Community Enforcement" stitched across their chests stood like sentinels. Standing between them was Linda Whitfield, the president of the Homeowners Association. She wasn't smiling, and neither were they. Reginald slowed, gripping the trash bag in one hand. He studied the trio. At first glance, they might have looked official to a nervous neighbor, but something about them didn't add up. Their vests were mismatched, one was too big, the other had Velcro straps hanging loose, their boots were scuffed as if they'd been bought secondhand, and the way they stood, too stiff, too rehearsed, set off alarms in his head. "Mr. Carter," Linda began, her voice sharp as if she'd practiced this moment, "we need to talk." Reginald set the trash bag down calmly, resting his hands on his hips. "About what?" One of the men stepped forward. He was tall, pale, with a shaved head and mirrored sunglasses that made it impossible to read his eyes. "Community enforcement," he said flatly. "You're in violation of neighborhood regulations. We're here to detain you until police arrive." "Detain me?" Reginald repeated, his tone low, almost amused. Linda crossed her arms tightly. "You've ignored repeated notices, and this has gone too far. We can't have someone undermining our community rules. These men are here to make sure you comply." Reginald raised an eyebrow, looking from Linda to the 2 so-called officers. "And what exactly are the charges?" The second man, shorter, broad-shouldered, with a messy beard, pulled a folded piece of paper from his vest. "Property violations, non-compliance with HOA orders, unauthorized modifications to your driveway, loud gatherings. The list goes on." Reginald almost laughed. "So you think that gives you the right to walk onto my property and, what did you call it, detain me?" The taller man's jaw tightened. "That's right. You can come peacefully or we'll make it harder on you." For a moment the air was still. The neighborhood seemed to pause, like the world itself was listening. From a few houses down, Reginald caught a curtain shift. Someone was watching. Then another. He knew the pattern. Eyes behind blinds, phones in hand. Reginald took a slow step forward, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Let me explain something to you. There is no such thing as community enforcement. You're not law enforcement. You don't have any authority here. And you're trespassing." Linda's cheeks flushed. "Don't talk to me about authority, Reginald. You think you're above the rules because of who you are. We've had complaints, real complaints, and I'm not going to sit by and let this neighborhood fall apart." The bearded man shifted uncomfortably, but the taller one stayed rigid, his hand hovering just above his belt as if he wanted Reginald to believe he was armed. Reginald tilted his head, his gaze sharp. He'd seen men like this before. Wannabes who thought a vest and a stern face made them untouchable. But he also knew what they didn't, that he wasn't just a homeowner. He was a trained federal agent who had spent years dismantling criminal networks and interrogating men who were a lot more dangerous than these 2 imposters. But instead of revealing anything, he simply smiled. "You've picked the wrong driveway today." Linda stepped closer, her voice rising. "Don't test me, Reginald. These men can hold you until police arrive, and when they do, you'll be the one answering questions." That was when Reginald finally dropped the trash bag to the ground. The bag split slightly, a soda can clattering across the concrete. The metallic sound echoed down the block. It wasn't the sound of surrender. It was the sound of a man planting his feet, preparing for a confrontation that wasn't going to end the way Linda thought. Neighbors pressed closer to their windows. A teenage boy across the street raised his phone, hitting record.
The moment was bigger than a homeowner and an HOA president. It was about to become a neighborhood spectacle. But as tense as things already looked, the real test of control was still ahead. The silence between them didn't last long. The taller man took a bold step forward, boots scraping against the concrete as if he wanted to stake his claim on Reginald's driveway. His mirrored shades reflected back the calm expression on Reginald's face, but inside, the impostor was itching to prove himself. "Sir, don't make this difficult," the man said rigidly. "You're being non-compliant. That means we have the right to escalate." Reginald's lips curved into something close to a smirk. "Escalate? You're standing on my property with no badge, no legal authority, and no clue how deep in trouble you already are. You've got 30 seconds to back off before you regret this stunt." Linda snapped her head toward him, her voice dripping with irritation. "You think threats are going to make this better? You've ignored letters, warnings, and fines. The HOA exists to keep this neighborhood safe and respectable. People like you—" She caught herself mid-sentence, her mouth tightening as if she'd almost said too much. Reginald caught it instantly, his eyes narrowing. "People like me, huh, Linda? Careful how you finish that thought." The bearded man interjected, trying to reassert control. "Look, this doesn't need to get ugly. Just come with us, we'll wait for the officers, clear this up, and maybe they'll go easy on you." "Officers?" Reginald asked flatly. "You mean the actual police, or the fake badges you two probably ordered online?" The taller man stiffened, but his partner glanced at Linda with unease. She pushed forward, determined to keep the illusion intact. "These men are authorized by the HOA board to ensure compliance. We don't have to answer to you." Reginald chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Linda, listen to yourself. You brought two grown men in bargain bin tactical gear to my driveway. You really think that's how the law works?" By now, the audience around them was growing. Curtains moved in nearly every house on the street, and more phones appeared in windows. Someone had even stepped onto their porch, filming openly. Reginald's voice dropped low, meant for the imposters, but audible enough for the neighbors watching. "You want to know what real authority looks like? It's not two men playing soldier. It's training, it's law, it's accountability. And I promise you, the real cops are very interested in this little performance." The bearded man's throat bobbed, his confidence slipping, but the taller one doubled down, taking another step closer until he was inches from Reginald. "I'm not playing. You're in violation, and if you resist, we'll restrain you. Don't test me." Reginald didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned in slightly, his voice calm but cutting. "Son, I've dealt with cartel enforcers who are less reckless than you. Do yourself a favor and move back before this turns into something you can't walk away from." For the first time, doubt flickered across the man's face. His bravado was cracking under the weight of Reginald's composure. Linda, refusing to lose ground, barked out, "Why should the rest of us live by the rules while you do whatever you want? We have a system, Reginald. We have order, and if you won't respect it, then maybe you don't belong here at all." Reginald's gaze fixed on her. Respect isn't forced with fake cops and threats. It's earned. And right now, what you're doing isn't about rules. It's about control. The words hit harder than she expected. For a brief second, Linda's confidence faltered, but she quickly masked it, folding her arms even tighter across her chest. The bearded man shifted his weight, his nerves finally breaking through. "Maybe we should wait in the street," he muttered to his partner. But the taller one shot him a glare. "No, we're not leaving." Reginald let out a slow exhale, studying them carefully. He knew their type. He'd interrogated men who lived on intimidation, who mistook fear for respect, and he also knew exactly how to dismantle them without raising a fist. "Tell me something," Reginald said evenly, turning his attention back to Linda. "When you called these two clowns, did you think this through? Because the second the real police roll up, and trust me, they're on their way, they're not going to ask me the hard questions. They're going to ask you why you thought you had the authority to stage an arrest." Linda blinked, the color draining slightly from her cheeks. From across the street, someone shouted, "Leave him alone!" The voice carried loud enough to ripple down the block. Suddenly, this wasn't just an HOA confrontation. It was turning into a neighborhood standoff. Reginald kept his eyes locked on the men in front of him. "This is your last chance. Walk away now, before the whole block watches you get hauled off in handcuffs." The bearded man's face twitched, his resolve slipping, but the taller one clenched his fists, unwilling to let go of the illusion of power.
By now, the street was alive with attention. What started as a tense exchange in Reginald's driveway had turned into a live spectacle. Curtains weren't just shifting anymore. Windows were opening and doors cracked ajar. People were leaning over their porches, phones held up, eager to capture every second of what felt like a scene straight from a television show. A retired couple, the Hendersons, stood shoulder to shoulder on their porch across the street. Mr. Henderson shook his head, muttering loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, "Never seen anything like this. What's she thinking bringing fake police into this neighborhood?" His wife whispered back, "I told you Linda would go too far one day." Reginald caught their words in fragments, but he kept his focus on the two imposters. His mind was sharp, cataloging every detail. Their sloppy gear, the way the taller man kept glancing down the street as if expecting backup that wasn't coming, the restless twitch of the bearded man's hands. They weren't professionals. They were actors in a play that was starting to crumble. From the sidewalk, a teenager named Marcus Johnson, whom Reginald had seen shooting hoops before, raised his phone higher and called out, "Yo, Mr. Carter, I got you on live. Thousands of watching." The taller imposter snapped his head toward him. "Put that down," he barked, taking a threatening step in the boy's direction. That was the wrong move. Reginald shifted instantly, cutting his body between the man and the team. His voice sharpened, cold and steady. "You even think about touching that kid, and this ends right here." The imposter froze, realizing for the first time that Reginald wasn't intimidated, not even close. Linda, flustered, tried to regain her footing. "This is a neighborhood matter. None of you should be interfering." Her words carried, but they only fueled the crowd. A woman with a baby on her hip yelled from a porch, "Neighborhood matter? Looks like harassment to me." More voices chimed in. "This is wrong. Where do you even find these guys? You can't arrest your neighbor for cutting his grass too short." The longer Linda and her enforcer stood there, the less control they seemed to have. What was meant to scare Reginald had turned into a scene where they were the ones on trial, judged by the eyes of every neighbor around. Reginald let the silence hang for a moment before he spoke again. "Linda, do you hear them? This isn't order, this is chaos, and you created it." Her jaw clenched, but her voice trembled slightly. "You're twisting this, Reginald. You've always been a problem, always bending the rules, ignoring the standards we worked so hard to build." He tilted his head, studying her. "No, Linda. The real problem is that you confuse control with leadership. They're not the same." That line carried through the block like a verdict. Neighbors shifted, whispering, nodding to one another. Phones kept recording, lenses catching every flicker of tension. The bearded imposter wiped sweat from his brow. He was unraveling. "Look, man, maybe we should just go. This isn't worth it." But his partner hissed, "No, we finished this." The taller man squared his shoulders, trying to look larger than he was. "Last warning, you either come with us peacefully or we'll use force." Reginald almost laughed at the absurdity. "You really want to do this in front of every witness on this street, with half a dozen cameras pointed at you? Go ahead, show the world who you really are." The taller man faltered, his eyes darted nervously at the glowing phone screens, at the murmurs rising in the background. He could feel the weight of judgment pressing in from all sides. Linda, desperate to regain momentum, shouted, "Do it! Don't let him intimidate you. Put him in cuffs. Show the neighborhood who's in charge." Her words backfired. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A middle-aged man from 3 houses down yelled back, "Linda, you've lost your mind. You're not the police." Others chimed in, their voices turning the tide firmly against her. Reginald seized the moment, his voice rising just enough to carry, calm but commanding. Everyone here sees what's happening. This isn't about rules or violations. This is about power, fake power. And these men are being pushed by someone who doesn't know the law, doesn't respect the law, and thinks intimidation is leadership. The bearded man dropped his gaze to the ground, shame washing over him. He muttered under his breath, "I didn't sign up for this." Eddie glared at him, then at Linda, torn between pride and fear. But before he could decide, Reginald stepped slightly closer, closing the space between them. His eyes were locked onto Eddie's, his voice dropping to that chilling register only professionals carried. "You lay one finger on me, and I promise you, the real police won't even have to ask me who you are. They'll already know because I'll walk them through every single mistake you've made in the last 10 minutes. You think you're intimidating me? Son, I dismantle men like you for a living." The words landed like a hammer. Eddie froze, his arm locked in place, the cuffs dangling uselessly. The crowd erupted, not with cheers, but with a low rumble of approval, voices overlapping. "He's right. Leave him alone. You're done." The street itself was choosing sides, and it wasn't with Linda or her imposter enforcers. Reginald finally straightened, his body language relaxed but unyielding. "Here's the truth. This is the end of your game. You don't have authority, you don't have power, and the longer you stand here pretending you do, the deeper the hole you're digging." Eddie's shoulders sagged, his grip loosening on the cuffs. The bearded man backed up another step, visibly unraveling. Linda, however, looked like she might explode, her face flushed red, her voice breaking into a shriek. "You don't belong here. You never have. That's why you're fighting so hard." The words hung in the air, ugly and raw. The neighbors' murmurs sharpened into outrage. Someone yelled, "That's enough, Linda." Another voice, louder this time, "You're exposing yourself." Reginald kept his composure, but the sting of her words was not lost on him. He looked at her for a long moment, disappointment clear in his eyes. Then he turned back to Eddie and his partner. "Take my advice, walk away now, because the next chapter in this story doesn't end with you walking home. It ends with flashing lights, handcuffs, and charges you won't be able to explain away." But Linda wasn't ready to quit, and her desperation was about to push the imposters into making their most reckless move yet.
The tension should have broken when the cuffs hit the ground, but Eddie wasn't finished. His pride wouldn't let him walk away with sweat dripping down his temple and his chest rising sharply. He lunged forward, shoving past Sean and closing the gap between himself and Reginald. The crowd gasped in unison, phones tilted, capturing every angle. Someone shouted, "Don't touch him!" But Eddie either didn't hear or didn't care. He reached for Reginald's wrist, intent on forcing the cuffs back into play. That was his final mistake. In one fluid motion, Reginald's training kicked in. He sidestepped, seized Eddie's arm, and twisted it behind his back with surgical precision. The cuffs Eddie had dropped moments earlier were now in Reginald's hands, snapping shut around Eddie's own wrists before the man could even process what had happened. Eddie cried out more from shock than pain and stumbled to his knees. The entire exchange had taken less than 3 seconds, and the crowd roared with disbelief. Someone shouted, "Did you see that?" Another voice echoed, "He didn't even fight back. He just moved." Reginald didn't gloat. He simply held Eddie in place with minimal force, his voice calm, professional, as though he were conducting business. "You're done. Don't resist. It'll only make it worse." Linda's face twisted in horror. "What are you doing? You can't arrest him!" Reginald's eyes snapped at her, sharp and cold. "You're right, I can't. But I can detain him for impersonating an officer until real law enforcement arrives. And considering he just attempted to assault me on my own property, the charges keep stacking." The neighbors erupted again. Some clapped. Others shouted in outrage at Linda. "You set this up. You pushed them too far. This is on you, Linda." Sean, who had already stripped off his vest, took several steps back, his hands raised. "I'm out. I'm done." His voice cracked with genuine fear. "Lady, you never told us he was law enforcement." Reginald's voice cut through, calm and steady. "That's because she didn't know." Linda blinked, momentarily disarmed. "What are you talking about?" Reginald straightened, keeping Eddie restrained with one hand. His other hand reached into his back pocket, pulling out a worn leather wallet. He flipped it open with practiced ease, holding it high enough for everyone, including the dozens of cameras pointed at him, to see. The gold badge glinted in the sunlight. "I'm Special Agent Reginald Carter, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The street went silent. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves in the breeze and Eddie's ragged breathing as he knelt, cuffed on the driveway. The neighbors stared, their shock tangible. Mrs. Henderson, across the street, clutched her husband's arm and whispered, "I knew he carried himself different." Marcus, the teenager, still filming, shouted, "No way! FBI! He's FBI!" The phones caught every second. The badge, the authority in his voice, the look on Linda's face as the truth sank in. Reginald's eyes never left her. "You came onto my property with imposters, Linda. You endangered your own neighbors thinking intimidation would give you control. But you didn't do your homework. You had no idea who you were dealing with." Her lips quivered, but she tried to recover. This is abuse of power. You can't just—" He cut her off, his voice like steel. "Abuse of power? That's rich, coming from the woman who staged a fake arrest over an HOA dispute. What I'm doing is lawful. What you did is criminal." The neighbors murmured again, this time with an edge of disgust. Every word Linda tried to speak only buried her deeper in shame. Reginald adjusted his grip on Eddie and addressed the crowd. "Let's be clear. This isn't about lawn height or driveways. It's about people pretending to have authority they don't. People who think fear is leadership. That ends today." Eddie groaned, his pride shattered, while Sean stood frozen on the edge of the driveway, looking like he wanted to melt into the ground. Linda finally shouted, desperation boiling over, "You're making a spectacle of this! You're humiliating me!" Reginald's expression softened, though his tone didn't. "No, Linda, you did that yourself. You let pride blind you. You put this entire neighborhood at risk because you couldn't stand the thought of losing control." Phones kept rolling. The evidence was undeniable. Eddie was breathing heavily now, sweat soaking through his shirt, the cold steel of the handcuffs a bitter reality on his wrists. For Linda, the humiliation was permanent. The reputation she had so fiercely guarded was now a viral spectacle, broadcast for the world to see, dismantled, not by a rival, but by her own reckless ambition. And all because she picked the wrong driveway on the wrong day.